The studio is Rae Andreaccio, who's mother of Christian, and brother, Chris Thompson. Welcome, both of you. How are you?
Good morning.
Chris, good to have you, sir.
Thank
you. Anytime we got people from our hometown of Meridian, it's always a pleasure. Rae, how are you?
Doing pretty good this morning.
Thank you so very, very much. Let me preface this by this one. Christian was found dead upstairs in the bathroom of his apartment from a single gunshot wound to the head. And after a mere 45-minute investigation, local police ruled his death a suicide. In the time since that 45-minute determination, more questions have gone unanswered than answered. I think you would agree with that.
Yes.
And you fought going on, it's almost been 6 years now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And trying to get, you and a lot of other people have been trying to get some answers on this one. You spent almost 6 years in a place that I think occupies both the sorrow of losing a child and also the problem, unfortunately, of a lot of anger building up because there are more questions unanswered than answered. I do want to ask you, I listened to almost every episode. I think there's one or two episodes that I haven't. Are they still doing that, or what's the status of the episodes?
They've completed the season. They've been releasing a bonus episode here or there, and if any developments occur, they'll do another episode to update the people who are following the case. And then there's another, Sheila Wysocki has been following also and has started doing some episodes up into probably the election.
I don't know if anybody that I've seen as tenacious as you on this. And Chris, as her brother, I think you would agree with that.
Yes.
How's this affected you?
It's affected me by watching Rae, and what her and Todd have had to go through. It's affected our entire family. But
I mean, when you looked at after the death, you had so many questions that couldn't be answered, and almost every step of the way, you got answers that produced even more questions. I don't even know where to begin on this one other than what you would like to say. And we all understand that a parent never wants to think that a child actually committed suicide. And you had different people around you that you brought in, some investigative people, some that had a lot of experience in this. And the reason I talk about the validity of it, and I've said it on the air, that there is no doubt that the Meridian Police Department, after 45 minutes doing this, said that it was a suicide, and there were so many questions that they screwed up and actually started this whole thing as far as the questions are concerned. Have you ever gotten a definitive ruling on whether or not the DA could reopen an investigation? Because we've had people say that they can't unless they get new evidence, and I had somebody who said they could. We ever gotten a definitive answer on that?
Well, I've had several lawyers from all over the country, and then even had a law class at one of the law schools here in Mississippi who kind of took it on as a project to look into it. And there's no statute that says that a DA has to have new evidence. A DA has the authority to take anything they want to a grand jury. So that's really not accurate to say that new evidence is required.
So in other words, if there are enough unanswered questions, they could do that?
Well, that, or if they just feel like that it wasn't presented appropriately the first time. Again, just really for any reason that they wanted to. Statute
of limitations play into that?
No.
Dylan Swearingen and Whitley Goodman were both key figures in the life and final moments. What do you know about both of them? I mean, what would you like to say? And what about them up to this date? Because you're always getting new information. But how do they play into this?
Well, I'm probably the last person you need to ask that question to.
Well,
because
from
of course,
a mom, I think you'd be the first person.
I mean, I do not know Dylan that well. He was not someone who came to our home very often or that I had much contact with, and he was not a long-standing friend of Christian's. Whitley's, that she and Christian had been in a relationship for about 10 months, and at one point she lived at our home. There was a lot of problems and red flags while she was there, to the point that we had to ask her to leave. I was very concerned about the relationship between she and Christian because of her behavior and some personality things that I just felt like were not good for him. And I think any mother wants their son or daughter to be with a positive person. And I felt like she was a negative influence. And so that's what led, for me to take other steps to try and protect him, as in having people to watch her before even his death. We had people watching her and collecting information, I guess, because, of course, I never thought that she or someone in her circle would kill him. I never thought it would get that serious. I would have gone to further steps if I'd have thought that. But I was just afraid that it was not a good situation, and so I was trying to protect him.
Do you think that's what happened?
Oh, I know that's what's happened.
Do you think it was both of them together, and it was it an accident, or I don't know if we've ever heard on any of the episodes where you had a chance to say, okay, here's what I think happened?
Well, we know there was a third person in the apartment, and probably a fourth. We're not 100% who the fourth person was. We've always said that Dylan and Whitley would not have been physically able to, I guess you say, handle Christian. And we have an eyewitness that places.
You mean to move the body?
Well, just even prior to death, it would be difficult for them to, Whitley was, a small stature person. And, of course, I guess we think of a girl not necessarily being able to physically handle a guy. Dylan was not a very physical person, and my son was, and he could take care of himself, and neither one of them would have been able to subdue him, I guess you'd say. I
don't know if anybody else who's got more information on this, of course. Do you have an idea who that other person was in there?
Yes, we have an eyewitness of him coming out of the apartment that day.
Did you say, has it been on the record who that is?
No, we have not.
Have you presented this to some of the authorities to at least interview him or her?
Oh, yes. They've had this information for several years.
Do you also find it a little bit weird, because I know on one of the episodes they talked about that Dylan was the guy who picked him up when he left the boat to come home. Was that unusual to you?
Well, it was unusual for Christian to get off the boat. I mean, you're not supposed to get off the boat. You have to get permission. So that was unusual in itself. For it to be Dylan, I wouldn't say that that necessarily raised red flags, because Dylan owed him some money for a car wreck that he had wrecked Christian's truck, and so Christian paid to have the truck fixed. Dylan had never. So I could see where he'd say, well, you owe me this money. Come pick me up, and that we'll call it even.
Do you feel like everything in the podcast, and I know you were close to these guys and they were trying to do as best job as possible, do you feel everything was accurately portrayed?
No, it was very accurately. They vetted everything, and they didn't just take it from me. Everything, actually, there were things that I would have liked to have been on there that, they wouldn't put on there because they didn't feel like I could 100%, they believed that it occurred, but because I couldn't 100% give them a witness or give them something, they wouldn't put anything out there that was not provable.
This is one of those hard interviews because a lot of the people in the audience have not heard that, so they don't know the players, they don't know the incremental things that go on here. So, but I just got to put that aside in the limited time I have with you and ask you, if you have time to tell the people that are not haven't listened to the episodes, here are the 3 or 4 things as far as the evidence that keeps my hopes alive that somebody will investigate.
The most, I guess, compelling evidence to me would be the level of rigor he was in.
Can we talk about that when we come back?
Sure.
All right, we got a quick break here. I want to talk about that when we return with Rae Andreaccio and also her brother, Chris Thompson. And Chris, you can speak up anytime you want to.
She's doing a fine job.
She's doing a good job. I will agree with that. Back with more coming up next.